He's the representative and then he dropped out because they found out that his property was divided in half, and his house was in the other district, and the rest of his property was in the right district. So he had to drop out and he was from JMRS. But he is the brother who died that night. I will blame you though if you drink
Show you the middle of summer. Believe me, I'm going fast I can. But you gotta blame John for this, right?
My job?
Yes, your John.
Well, for my sickness.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm 30.
You go, Henry. Smell it already?
You know, it's, our house, in the last month is, my wife will come down the hall and she goes, the other day she said, it smells like electricity burning. He said, no, it's just, it's Christmas. Emergency, yeah, she was there Tuesday. Who's sick? Oh, really? And I shook his hand.
I call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Kavanaugh?
Here.
Councilmember DePorter?
Here.
Vice Mayor Brown is not here yet. Councilmember Yates?
Present.
Councilmember Hansen's not here yet. Councilmember Magazine is not here yet. And Councilmember Lachey?
Here.
Thank you. Discussion with direction to staff regarding updating and prioritizing the capital improvement projects. Ken?
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, we're here tonight to discuss the CIP. As you know, back in, I guess, 08, 09, we started doing financial accounting of all the projects that had been on the books. And numerous requests had been assigned capital improvement project numbers as placeholders for a project until funding and council approval can be obtained through the budget process. And over the years, since the 08, 09, the list of the CIP numbers have grown and certain projects have been completed. However, many remain on the list. that at the time probably were important, but some of them were not as important as they were back then, today. So we're here to further discuss the CIP, with the first being the projects being shown as completed, and the staff's recommendation for projects to be removed from the overall CIP list, and consideration for the 15-16 proposed CIP projects to be considered, and as well as projects for consideration, which is part of the pavement management program that we're trying to complete with the second phase, which is the asphalt replacement program. We have the maintenance program. We're looking for the asphalt pavement replacement program. So what I like to do is maybe start with a presentation, and please ask questions as we go along. The staff is here, Paul and Craig and Mark, Randy and Randy are here. If you have any further questions or want to go into detail about any specific projects, they're here to further discuss with you. But again, as I said, we're going to completed capital projects. We're going to talk about the past capital improvement planning, the current capital improvement planning projects, as I mentioned, and the current ones, as you can see, this was in your budget presentation. That was part of the fiscal year 14-15 annual budget that was approved. And as you can see, there were many projects that were budgeted for contingent one upon funding and or if IGA, intergovernmental agreement fundings were there to develop that, and or potential grants to do it. And I can go down this list if you'd like. They're pretty self-explanatory, and it's the ones that we saw in the last budget go around 6-8 months ago. But Ashbrook Wash is being scheduled, and as you know, that's on Saguaro Boulevard. That piece of it is going to be done as an intergovernmental agreement with McFlood, and it's initiated, but final costs are yet to be determined due to an SRP easement relocation issue. Working with the town attorney's office and SRP's attorney to work on those easements so that we can then work with our partner in that, which is McFlood, Maricopa County Flood Control District, who is participating in the project in the tune of $720,000. The miscellaneous drainage projects, obviously we do every year. It was $30,000, but this year we did $50,000, so that we needed to catch up or start attempting to try to catch up on a number of those drainage projects, so that these washes and these other drainage areas that are within our transportation system adequately drain. The downtown greening project, we've always had a placehold for projects that for the downtown greening committee, that should they get grants, they would have a budget authorization to do that, but obviously the funds would have to come first. The downtown vision plan, obviously it's been there as a placehold, but not been initiated, so the money placeholds and puts back into the economic development fund, stays there. That's designated for downtown. And Avenue of the Fountains median project, obviously that's been completed. Fire Station 2 relocation, that's been on the books for some time. We've still been going through the due diligence of the two potential sites for that project, as well as the land trade on one of those sites with MCO, which is almost complete. It's a 2009 project estimate, and that frankly is incomplete. With 2015, the project numbers are vastly different, so partial funding is only available for that project as it sits today. The assistance to firefighters' radios was completed. We actually had funding for that. We budgeted that out of the this past budget to do the new radios. Civic Center improvements was basically it's a placehold to do some replacement of some cracked sidewalks since the complex was put in around the square. the circle, over by the library museum. The Fountain Park improvements are underway. It was budgeted for $1.3 million. The project currently came back with bids of $750,000, and it's underway as we speak. The Fountain Lake Water Quality Project, there's $300,000 that's budgeted for that. And had been budgeted for that, and it's initiated and yet to be bid out. We're still working through that process to get the bid document scored away so that we could bid for that water quality improvements, which are more aerators and more mixers of the water so that we can have that aeration better with it. The Urban Trail program, it's a multi-phase project. For that was budgeted, was initiated. The Unpaved Alley project was initiated as well, and the construction is beginning on that one as well. But there's other, it's a multi-year project for some other ones that are yet to be budgeted for. The Shea Saguaro project obviously is under, it's funded through a bond, plus some development fees monies that we have for the expansion of some of those lanes that are there. Plus we have Maricopa County Department of Transportation funding that takes that piece that's beyond from our corporate limits to that area of ADOT on Beeline. They've participated with that improvement to pay for it. Plus, we have some developer funds adjacent to Shea that was added to that project. And again, as you know, we're in the middle of that project, and it's expected to be completed by June. The downtown sidewalk was a project of what we could get through the adjacent owners, and the ones that were feasible we were able to put in. Saguaro Boulevard project obviously is off and running through the initiation of a bond election and receiving the funds for that project. And we're actually paving asphalt today, as you saw the emails on the north side. The Palisades Saguaro traffic signal will be part of the Saguaro project. That's the one that's probably one of the oldest signals in town and needs to be replaced. That's going to be part of the project in its entirety, and we saved up money in the CIP to do that project. Fountain Hills Boulevard shoulder paving project is still on the books. We have a grant to do that. It hasn't been done because of the other priority projects that are up above it. This will basically put a little bit wider shoulder on those scalloped areas of Fountain Hills Boulevard. And the Highway Safety Improvement Program, it's not fully funded and not initiated at this point in time, but it is budgeted for. Shea Boulevard eastbound lane project, again, it's not initiated. And then we have some contingency funds that are within the CIP to help balance out the any oversee areas that were unforeseen during the planning phases of those projects and what the actual cost could be for that. So right now in the 14-15 budget, there's a $22,207,830 budget obligation for all of those projects that I have just discussed and were approved by the council for the 14-15 budget.
Ken,
Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there any possibility that we lose these grants if we don't use them by a certain date?
Yes. I mean, there are some time frames on those, and there's going to need to be some consideration on a couple of these, or whether we should do them or not do them.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Because we're not sure we're going to have the matching funds. Excuse me.
Right. Councilman Magazine?
Ken, of the 22 million, can you break out how much of it is grants and how much coming out of this CIP fund?
In its entirety, actually, no, I can't.
That's on a later slide, isn't it?
Well, it is and it isn't. It's partial, but not its entirety. On what budget obligation is versus what, where the money actually is planned to come from. I don't have that number for you.
Mayor, if I may. Ken, the Fountain Hills shoulder paving project doesn't jump out as as a priority. As the mayor mentioned, there's a significant, I'm not sure if she was referring to this, but there's a significant grant there that we've received, and we're looking at $41,000 investment on our side. My question is, I travel Fountain Hills Boulevard often, as many of us do, and I notice that shoulder itself seems to erode every time or most times during the monsoon season, and then we're out there doing excavation work, and I'm wondering if it's counterproductive. We're, as I stated, it may not be a priority, but we're spending money to constantly maintain that after every rainy season. And if you look at what that cost is over the years, it probably gets close to what we would be spending here. So I'm not sure if there's staff that can validate or verify that. Are we getting out there grading that? Are we getting erosion? Are we spending money on it and going through that cycle year after year?
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, ask the Development Services Director to maybe enlighten us on the project and where it came from and where we're at today.
Yeah, Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Leger, to answer your question, that is actually a CMAQ grant, which is basically for air quality. Yeah. Because if people walking, biking, cars go off, it kicks up dust. We're actually at 60% design on that project, but it's been put on hold since we don't have our staff availability. We've been working on other large developer projects that are coming in. So we're at 60% design. It's been that way for quite a long time. We haven't had time to review everything. The town engineer and myself were actually just discussing before this meeting hiring an outside consultant to review those plans for us so we can get that going and push that project forward.
Mayor, if I may.
And yes, we do. When it rains, we do go out there.
That was my question.
And we have to go out there with our tractor, and we regrade all the time out there.
Okay. Are we using our own, or are we contracting
Our
it
own.
out?
We use our own.
Very good. Thank you.
As we know, that Fountain Hills Boulevard scallop, they call it scallop because it goes from 4 lanes down to 2 lanes in those 2 areas, and frankly, it doesn't drain properly because it doesn't have adequate drainage structures to that, and curb and gutter, obviously, to adequate drain. So that's why the edges erode out. And the second part of it, it's, we're not just in the car business of moving cars around. We're in the multimodal business of moving pedestrians and bicyclists, and that's a very dangerous section. And that's why staff, from what I understand, went after those pieces, at least to give a little bit wider spot for that, because those 2 spots are very dangerous. So it's really a health and safety issue, as well as some public works concerns such as drainage and continued improvement, maintenance on those shoulders.
Ken, what does that cost to hire an outside consultant? Sorry. You can sit closer.
Paul can get his exercise tonight.
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, off the top of when Randy and I were discussing, it could be $10,000 to $20,000. We don't have the scope of work. We don't, we haven't given them the scope of work to give us a price proposal. I believe if we don't keep going with that project shortly, we're going to be in danger of losing that grant. Okay. So that's one we really want to get moving on.
Okay, and you don't anticipate that the staff would be able to do that in the time frame? Is that your estimate?
Your staff's, you got one guy sitting there.
I know, he's a good guy.
He's looking at a Darrow Canyon, he's looking at, some big developments that are coming in.
So you then I can assume you're saying pretty soon we would lose it then.
Yeah, I think.
It would put off to FY17.
Yeah, but you have to go through the design and the construction, and there's with the federal grant, there's environmental clearances, right-of-way clearances that need to get done. So it's a pretty long process.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have a question right now? Okay, Ken.
Okay, so just to kind of show you where we're at funding-wise, and I'll ask Craig or the finance director to help us explain this a little more in depth. But at the fund balance at the end of January, in our CIP, we had $14,285,475. The plus from the other sources is $5,135,642, which I believe is the question that Councilmember Magazine asked. for that. Those are the other funds. That's the grants, that's the bonds, that's, other than what we save. Because remember where our construction sales tax comes from. 50% of the it's a sales tax on construction, and obviously it's changing this year because we've all been working with that process from last year's legislative process even to this year's legislative process. And we're not sure how that's going to pan out. But 50% of that revenue goes into the operating fund, into the general fund, to help fund as a revenue source. And the other 50% then goes to the CIP. And that adds into, if we do a bond project or if we have a grant project come in, those all go into the CIP as well. But that construction sales tax is 50% of what we bring in. And that's how it's funded. Or through intergovernmental agreements like we have with McFlood and McDOT, county monies that participate in two of our projects for us. That's where those funds are at. But if you look at them, these are the placeholders. These are the projects that we've looked at. And this is the Ashbrook Wash, which, Paul, maybe you can come up and explain, or Randy could come up and explain what that project is in detail, what they're actually going to do on it.
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of council, the Ashbrook Wash is kind of, if you know where the sanitary district's facility is, that's where the Ashbrook Wash runs, just to the south of that. There's a lot of erosion in that area, danger of overtopping, so the project actually extends back to Bayfield. There's going to be new culverts in Bayfield. There'll be, currently there's pipes under Saguaro. There'll be new large box culverts. So that's what that project does. It'll help carry the 100-year flood, helps get some people out of the flood zone, and then we're going to do some cleanup in the wash, removing a bunch of, there's like a field of palm trees down there, different things like that. So the Saguaro Boulevard project is going to stop about a couple hundred feet short on either side of the Ashbrook Wash, and when the Ashbrook Wash project starts up, then they'll fix the pavement in that area as well, because they're going to be in there digging it up. We don't want to put something in new that's just going to get destroyed. So where we're at now is the plans are at roughly 100% design, but there's a SRP line that needs to be relocated for a little over $200,000. SRP is claiming they're having prior rights with the easement. The town and flood control aren't necessarily agreeing with that. So it's really attorneys talking now before the flood control can bid that out. So that's where the project's at.
Any other questions for Paul? Okay. Oh, Councilman Magazine.
Well, I have a question on this slide. Is that all right?
Sure. Oh, yeah, whatever you like.
S6003, unpaved alley improvements, $324,000 and change. And then I'm trying to figure out the relationship between that and proposed capital projects, FY16 through 20, and the numbers are different. Can you tell me what the relationship is?
Correct, and Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Magazine, these are probably questions that I'll get answered as the town manager goes through the slides. That's what was budgeted in this current year's budget. We ended up doing the design in-house. We bid the project out. We actually had our pre-construction meeting this morning. They're going to start construction on Monday, and the alley we're doing now is phase 3 of what was 6 phases. But when we looked at it, we really only need 5 phases. There's an alley. It's considered an alley, but it's really kind of just a drainage piece. So we're gonna look at abandoning that right away. So the alley we're doing now, I believe the bid was around $150,000. Then next year, and this is the alley that starts at Panorama behind the AMVETS and kind of swings around to Enterprise Colony area. And then next year, we're going to be looking at doing the alley that's behind the funeral home and wraps back down around. And then the year after that, there's an alley on the north end of town by an SRP substation that we're looking at doing. And this all stems from a 2007 resolution to reduce particulate matter through the county.
To do what?
Reduce particulate matter, dust, basically dust.
How many unpaved alleys do we have?
Currently, there's there's three, and we're doing one of the three.
And how do you measure how much particulate matter is being emitted?
The county has monitoring stations around different areas.
I said this once before, just having seen a couple of these alleys, I hate spending the money on something like that.
Yeah.
It just really bothers me to spend that kind of money on these things, which are, I don't know, other than keeping particulate matter down, I'm not sure what benefit there is.
A lot of those businesses actually do use the alley as their primary access in these areas.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Ken?
Fire Station 2, those are the numbers that we received from, we requested an architect during our due diligence in this project, which again, there were 7 questions if everyone remembers, that those numbers that we saw previously, which was the 2.5 million, was an 09 number, fiscal year 2009. Well, here we are in 15, working through 14 on it, 2014, and an architect's estimate, and we went to an architect who builds fire stations and said, this is what's going on in fire stations being built around the valley. Okay, so that's the number we've got. What we think is a up-to-date number, but that's there for that project, and that's a lot of money. It's $1 million more than what was originally planned, 6 years ago for the project. Remember, we still have to answer 7 questions of the due diligence back to the council, which we're trying to do now, plus also get the land transferred from MCO on one of the sites so that the council could then consider which site that they want to finalize on, because there's 2 sites that would be considered in this relocation project, should the council want to go forward with it. Fountain Park, which is the Phase 6, that's the number that we're looking at. That's there, as I mentioned, the unpaved alleys, as we just talked about. Obviously, Shea Boulevard widening is part of that. But is that one, Paul? That's the new project? That's another project, or is that's just the current one from Technology out to Beeline? Thank you. And the Saguaro, as we know, is there. Fountain Hills Boulevard shoulder paving, as we just talked about, and then the traffic signal in Palisades. The other projects that were there as well is miscellaneous drainage, that we still need to clean out culverts and still do some drainage work that we do annually. The Avenue of the Fountains median and right-of-way, and the Fountain Lake Water Quality Project, again, as we talked about, and the urban trails improvements, and then the McDowell Mountain road repairs that we needed to do. And that does the available balance of, if we do the previous projects of those, if those all get out and consider these, then that's what we'll have left in our CIP, is $1.1 million.
Councilwoman Hanson?
Ken, on the McDowell Mountain Road repairs, where exactly is that? I mean, how far?
We'll ask Paul.
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Hanson, as you're heading out of town, just past the middle school, you'll come around a curve, and there's some signs that say bump, and it's a bump on a curve. So when it was under the county's jurisdiction before the annexation, they went out there. I'm told they went out there and fixed it once, and the problem has returned. So we're going to have an engineer go out there and take some core samples, look at it, and we really don't want to just repave a curve with a bump. We want to have an engineer look at it. So that's the repair. If you ever drive out there.
So this is Fountain Hills Boulevard going north to Rio Verde, and it turns into McDowell Mountain Road.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can't go back to the county and say you did a bad job.
You did a bad. Well, we'd like to, but we could, but they won't listen. Trust me. So we need to do some work on that. It's a safety issue.
And that's just an estimate. Once we get into it, who knows? But that's our estimate of what it would take to fix that.
Who knows what's underneath the road?
Yeah.
Like we're finding on Saguaro right now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so again, 1.1 million is what will be left over if we do those. I don't know if anyone has any further questions on those, or we want to hold off on that and discuss the next phase.
And that, Mayor, if I may, and that includes the other projects.
That includes these other ones,
Okay.
in what those numbers are looking at right now. The future capital improvement program, the projects for consideration, again, these, it's, again, it's 50% construction sales tax annually that we collect. And obviously, that fund was very robust when we were a growth community. We're not, we have 2,000 lots left that are entitled in this community, and will be a build-out phase of a community. So construction sales tax is, frankly, not really a viable fund coming in the future. It's just this new, this new reality that we're going to start facing. And the special revenue funds that we could accumulate from special revenues, or intergovernmental funds, or grants, or in this case, as well we did with Saguaro, bonding, where we bonded it and asked the people to do the project.
Councilman Magazine has a question.
Yeah, I'm probably the only one that doesn't understand. How would you define construction sales tax?
Transaction privilege tax on the construction of 40 or 60% of the project currently.
It's a calculation.
It's a formula.
It's 60%.
60%, which basically is the material of the project, and that's how it's calculated.
Thank you.
It's a sales tax on the materials.
I see. Thank you.
Is everybody diseased over here?
Mine are allergies.
Allergies. I'm sick.
Come on.
Go close to Alan. I won't do that, unless you want to switch and go to Dennis's seat.
Mayor, if I may.
Councilman Leger?
Thank you. That's 65% on materials. Are we still in a scenario on construction that if those materials are purchased outside of Fountain Hills, that we will?
You bring up a very good point. Today's issues, and I know that the mayor can help us because she was actively involved with it in the last legislative session, and limited, her and many other mayors and other cities helped to reduce that, the impact of what that legislation could have been. But what it comes down to is that, and we heard this walking into it, is that there's, in that law that was passed, there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. And the losers are basically the outlying communities, mostly rural Arizona, and the outlying communities such as ourselves, because it's going to be the point of service. Okay? And that means that a contractor can go get his point of service and buy his material in Mesa. Mesa gets the TPT, construction sales tax. We don't, even though they're building it here. Okay? That's what the new law basically entails.
That's their ultimate goal.
It's the ultimate goal of the legislature and how they calculated this. So there's going to be winners and losers, and we're one of them, simply put.
Winner or loser?
So far, they've just carved out the repairman.
Right.
We lose that.
And in this year's budget that was just approved, they want $20 million from the cities, towns, and counties to help fund the program of collecting that money. And that's Department of Revenue.
All to make it easier.
All to make it easier.
Yeah.
Not.
Thank you, Ken.
So, with that, as I said, I can go through the next phase, and then we can just get back into the recommendations and considerations that the council wanted to do. As the last part of this, and it's something that you've already seen. You saw it last year in the last year's retreat. For those of you that were on the council at the time, you saw it during budget of any potential projects or programs for the pavement management program. Obviously, the biggest asset and the biggest responsibility that the local government has, it's its transportation system. Right now, we have $150 million worth of assets out there in roads. Okay, and the trick is maintaining them and maintaining them in a safe manner. What we did 2 years ago was to create, and there's historical funding that the town has done since 2001 up to 14, how much money we've actually spent, from highway users operating funds to the total road maintenance projects that we've done throughout the year, or the general fund and CIP contributions towards street projects. That's the money that we spent. So I mean, I know when I first arrived here 3 years ago, there was a big I kept hearing this common discussion out in the public is that, well, we're not spending enough on roads. So I asked the staff to put that together to say, yes, we are. But, you know, with 390 miles of road that are sitting out there, lane miles, and 3.5 million square yards of asphalt, Paul, is what we're actually responsible for. 68 acres of medians, I mean, I can go on and on. And we just wanted to show that's the money that we've spent since '01. Now, I've done it. I'm grateful that I have 4.5 people that are out there doing that with us, but we also have some contracts, you know, and they're out there doing a great job on 390 lane miles of road and 3.5 million square yards of asphalt, 68 acres of medians we take care of. Those are outsourced for median and sweeping maintenance. We have sweeping contracts and median contracts, median maintenance contracts. And that number is wrong, and you'll have to forgive me, it's not 1.8 billion. It's actually $250 million has been swept by the legislature in the past 15 years from our highway user fund. And as you can see in that chart, that's how much money that's actually been taken away. And I know it's not representative, you can't see it from here, but I've shown this slide before many times. So let me put it this way. You know, the HERF fund is still a viable highway user revenue fund. That's our gas tax money, and it's given to us on per capita. In other words, our head count of what we have. But let me also point out that because it's a head count, when you have high growth communities and they get mid-decade census or they get decade census, that pie changes. And because we're not a high growth community anymore, that fund's going to get smaller. It's inevitable, unless something's done with the actual tax itself and considered there for highway users, for the gas tax. And they consider maybe increasing it. They haven't done it in 24 years. It's been the same tax for 24 years to do that. We got more road. And the problem, the paradox to this, is that you've got cars that are much, much more gas efficient, and you've got a whole lot more cars on the roads. So you got less gas, okay, being taxed and more cars on the road. That's the issue that we're facing. As you can see, as I mentioned, 390 lane miles of road. The council, upon staff's recommendation, created a pavement maintenance schedule. We did Zone 5 first, which you'll see is up in kind of the northwest corner, and then Zone 6, which is the northwest corner of the community. Zone 7 are the arterial roads of Palisades and Fountain Hills Boulevard and Shea, and you saw those projects. And by the way, on Zone 7, we also took $1 million. We appropriated $1 million from the CIP fund and put it over to do that portion of Shea where we milled and replaced from Palisades down to the Scottsdale corporate limits. That was $1 million project to do that. So that's less CIP money, but it went into Shea, which it needed to be replaced. It's our most high volume road, and again, it comes back down to safety issues with that road. We're in Zone 7. It will be initiated, Paul, in the summer. I'm sorry. Yes, wait. I'm sorry. Zone 1 in this summer, which is the northeast portion of town. Okay, and that's some of our older residential streets.
Yeah, Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council. Zone 1 is one of our oldest zones, largest zones. It's probably in the poorest shape of the roads of any area of town. So what we've been doing, why it says NA for 2014, we're letting that VLT and HERF that we use for the $1 million a year build up. Normally, we would try to do the projects at the end of the fiscal year, in the spring and summer, and we're kind of the small guy on the block when it comes to these projects, so it's hard for us to get the contractors lined up, get the projects done in time. We keep getting bumped for bigger projects. So what we're doing is we're letting the money build up this year, and then we'll start looking at doing the projects after the fiscal year starts instead of right at the end.
That's zone one.
So zone one, what we're gonna what we're gonna try to do is, the thicker red lines, we're gonna do mill and overlay. Because those roads are in such a condition that we can't really put slurry seal on them. Because it'll take us too long to get back and it'll just all come up.
Spider cracks.
Yeah, well,
Alligator.
if you look we did that patch on Saguaro 2 years ago, and it just started coming up. So you'd get that peeling off the top. It's happening on Grande right now, in spots. So just not the little dots, but just the big thicker lines. We've got Glenbrook on the upper left, Fayette around the middle school, or the elementary school, El Pueblo, Grande, and we're going to try to do Pepperwood and then Del Cambry. Those are our worst ones. Chandler just bid out a mill and overlay project that had some really good pricing, so we're going to try to piggyback off of that. That work in just the thicker red lines is probably $1.5 million. So what we're doing is we're building up that $1 million, and we're basically going to use all of our HERF reserve money to make up that extra $500,000. So, and then when we do mill and overlay, we have to make sure all the ADA ramps are compliant. So right now we're having an engineer look at all the ADA ramps along those project limits. So we're going to try to get those changed out this year and before the mill and overlay project. So then that'll be year one of zone one. So let me go back quick. So that'll be year one of zone one. Year two of zone one, we'll try to hit all these little dots. Those are 20 by 20, 40 by 40s that are falling apart that we need to go in and cut out. And we're also working with EPCOR for their improvements, those system improvement benefits. They had a bunch of valve replacements, service line replacements. So they're trying to go in right away and do those. So we're not cutting new roads. We don't want to do that. So the second year, and I don't know if the $1 million is going to cover it, but we'll have to go in and try to fix those spot areas and then slurry seal half of zone one or a quarter. And then the third year in zone one, the third year we're in zone one, we'll have to slurry seal the second half. And that's just due to the square yardage. It's 700,000 square yards, and slurry seal, crack seal is roughly $2.50 a square yard when we budget it. So it's a big project. Then when we get to zone two, we're going to have the same problem. A lot of the roads in the downtown area, if you look at them when you drive, they're really cracking. And we're going to have to look at doing some mill and overlay on those before we can even think about putting any slurry seal over the top of those. So if the money holds and the project holds, like we finish zone 5 in 2011, we won't be back in zone 5 to 2023. So it's, we're doing what we can with the money we have, but typically you would slurry seal every approximate 7 years, and you would do a mill and overlay every 25 to 30 years. And the roads are already 25, 30, 40 years old.
Any questions of Paul? Okay. So, the first part of the pavement management program was obviously the maintenance plan, and that's what we just talked to you about. The second part has always been, well, what do we do about trying to start addressing some of the asphalt replacement that's there? And obviously, we started with a Saguaro bond project to get, one of our largest roads that needed, it's the oldest road, one of the oldest roads in town, and needed to be replaced. And that's what's going on right now through a bond election of the voters and approve the project. We also received some grants from the Maricopa Association of Governments through the Prop 400 sales tax that went in. It's the freeway sales tax money. That's a regional road of significance, and that's why we were able to get money for it. It's the only road that's designated in Fountain Hills as that designation, so we were able to get money for that. what we're looking at as, and I'll highlight this one, this slide. Now, those of you have this on your screens. But again, the historical pavement management practices have consisted of crack sealing, surface sealing, and slurry for maintenance zones once every 7 years, and was funded through a combination of HERF, general funds, and CIP monies. In 2009, the town wanted to know what the pavement, the actual condition of it, so they commissioned Stantec to come in. And you've heard this before, but for the benefit of the public, Stantec Engineering came in and looked at it and said, you know, you need some ongoing money, not only to maintain, but you need some money to start replacing. And that they estimated it's about 2.8 million to really do that effectively, which would do overlays of 20% of the town streets, as well as slurry and surface seal treatments to the remaining streets. Well, this is a long-term pavement management program that's targeted for seven pavement management zones each year, and will replace the entire public street network over a 35-year period. Well, the town council approved a budget approximately $1 million a year, and that's for maintenance, and that's what Paul was alluding to, but it's predominantly the maintenance program that is from a vehicle license tax of $750,000 and $250 of highway user funds, and that gets the $1 million a year. Okay, and council made that as a priority. In other words, that's budgeted first, just like public safety is. You budget that first. So it's there. Again, the second phase of that we need to start talking about, because we've got some areas out there, some roads that need to be replaced and are going to need replaced, because we're going to have some arterials and some collectors that are going to be running up to 40 years, you know, in 40 years old. And most that's been done to it is slurried or crack sealed. So the maintenance program, you know, obviously it's perpetual. So you've got an operating fund for maintenance that's sitting there in $1 million. And what we're proposing for the council consideration is that for asphalt plan, that in order to create a sustainable asphalt replacement program, it's going to require about $2 million annually operational capital to actually pretty much comply with Stantec, although that Stantec report needs to be updated because it is a 2009 study. But some revenue options that we have of existing funds that could be used within our current operational budget, obviously, is maintain the current $1 million annual asphalt maintenance plan, okay, from the vehicle license tax and the HERF funds, as I mentioned. And then for asphalt replacement, consider a future arterial major collector road bond sometime after this one that we have for Saguaro is paid for. And remember, that's a 5-year payback on it, so 2020. Theoretically, that's supposed to be paid for so that we don't have any more debt on that road. And we could then consider another one, because we've got Fountain Hills Boulevard. That's, some of it's still the same age as Saguaro, but by the time that comes around, probably the rest of it's going to be the same, is going to be in need of some kind of a mill and replace, like we did out on Shea a year and a half ago, as well as Palisades, as well as Golden Eagle, and a few of those other collector streets. So we need to consider another road bond in the future, in the 2022, 2023, somewhere in that era, to be thinking about that kind of a project in order to meet the Stantec plan. Reprioritize a portion of the annual capital improvement plan where feasible, if we have any monies left, to do like an annual appropriation of, you know, $200,000 if we've got the money there in the CIP monies, so that we can look at that, so that can be dedicated over. I'm not sure we can, but that, at least consideration for that at this point in time. And most important is that we have 0.2% sales tax that's there, that pays for currently the McDowell Mountain Preserve and for the buildings of community center and the library and museum buildings. And those will come, the debt service on that will be paid for in 2020, the same time as Saguaro will be paid for. So we can then take that 0.2% and authorize, like we did with the pavement maintenance program, do the same thing with pavement asphalt replacement, and then talk about those monies being moved over. So as you can see in the chart, fiscal year of what we have budgeted for HERF and VLT revenues for the maintenance side of it, up to 2025 as a planning horizon only for this. And then we can look at that excise tax that once we pay for those bonds could be moved over, because that's what's paying for those paying for the bonds right now on an annual basis. Move that over to coincide with the maintenance program to be used for asphalt. And if you'll notice, that'll start in 2017. That we could be able to start collecting money for that. 2018 the same. Again, 19 and 20. But when 20 comes along, we'll have some more debt paid for, and we'll be able to increase that to $1 million. So that over a 25-year period, we could be looking at about a $19.5 million investment into our transportation system for maintenance and asphalt replacement. That's existing monies plus a bond issue, a GO bond issue that will be required in the early 2020s to be considered for those arterials on asphalt mill and replacement. I'll be happy to answer any questions, but those are our recommendations. So, again, the council tonight, we're asking to consider approving the list of non-viable CIP projects as recommended by staff, and to have staff bring back a recommendation for prioritizing the remaining CIP projects to a future council meeting for further discussion and possible action. Second, we ask the council to move to approve the list of CIP projects for inclusion into the 2015-16 budget. And 3, move to approve the amendment of the pavement management plan regarding the asphalt replacement plan as recommended by staff. We'd be happy to answer any questions on those 3 recommendations.
Okay, we'll start with questions. Councilman Magazine.
Not on the recommendation, but going back to the planned street revenue and road maintenance and so on. Those numbers aren't adjusted for inflation, is that correct?
Currently, no.
So, I mean, there's 19.
You can just go by what we have or what we will have for what our debt service is today, and those will just be moved over.
So when you look at the 19 million going out that many years, we're talking a lot more money.
Possibly, yes, depending on what inflation is.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
it's going to be
up and down.
inflation. The question is how much, and so that we really can't even depend on that. And the $1 million a year, we don't know what's going to happen to the revenue because of her and so on. I mean, just so many variables that this is at best a guesstimate. Is that correct?
It's a swag, scientific.
Scientific.
Wild guess, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood.
To the best information that we have today.
Probably the best you could do right now.
Not a pretty picture.
Questions? Any questions on this side?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Councilman Yates.
the approximate road bond that you're looking for,
10,
10 million?
and that's right off the top of my head, okay? It's
Ish.
not, yeah. That's 5, 6, 7 years down the road.
I'm with you.
But what I'm recommending is that you council, the then council, can start considering that, because that's what they're going to need to do if they want to try to start approaching that curve. Because we're not going to be able to find operational monies to mill and replace asphalt our roads on arterials and collectors. And not too many communities do that anyway. They go bond them. We're going to have to do the same thing.
Ken, would that still be 5 years? The 10, or would it be extended out?
It depends on when the council thinks that they need to do that after Saguaro's paid for.
Okay. Thank you. Questions? Any questions?
Madam Mayor.
Councilman Yates.
In the simplest terms, if we didn't do it this way, what are we short annually based on what Stantec is telling us?
Well, they're looking at $3 million a year. But they were also, Paul, what were they asking for in the report? I've forgotten, that it needed to have an initial bond? Yeah, up front, which was basically, we're doing it reversal.
And pushing off the maintenance, in essence, 10 years, and then trying to catch up from that.
No, not really, no. No, we're still doing maintenance best we can on asphalt that can be maintained. There's asphalt out there that's can't be maintained, as Paul just alluded to.
Right.
That we have to go in, and you don't have to go out and replace the whole road. You have to go in and replace pieces of it, because some of that asphalt still lasts. So, but you at least maintain it with a wearing surface.
Any other questions? Councilwoman Hanson.
Just a clarification, so I know I'm looking at the right thing. In your suggested motions, it refers to a non-viable CIP project. Is that the same as your list that's projects to be canceled?
Yes.
Okay. Then just a quick question on, there's a few of them, let's see, the numbers, like S6012, the ones that have to do with reconfiguration of intersections. Can you just kind of give me a little synopsis on what that was referring to about reconfiguring?
I think you heard me say this some time ago. There are projects in there that we don't even know about, okay? Because the staff that put that together, you know, based off of the development impact fee studies and the strategic plan that pretty much put a lot of these projects together, are no longer here. And we can't find records on them. So I don't know if Randy or Paul knows some about those, but I'm not sure what they actually are.
I guess, in guessing, I know we've got a couple places where sections of the median on Saguaro have been removed in the past to make kind of a safe area for people pulling out onto Saguaro. One comes to mind is where the frontage road ends by the sanitary district, has a little building down there, and it's just past the theater. So that when you turn off of there and you turn onto Saguaro, you've got this really nice wide area that you can at least pull halfway over, stop, and look at the oncoming traffic. And I just wondered if that was what had been in mind when we talked about reconfiguring some of the intersections, because the two that come to mind for me are the ones at Saguaro and Colony and Saguaro and Panorama, that are two really, especially at Panorama, where you've got the 4 different stop signs, and it just, I didn't know if a reconfiguration of taking out some of the median to create one of those safe haven places for turning traffic.
I'm going to refer to Paul, but I don't think, especially on Saguaro, I don't think that's not planned in there on the project.
Mayor Kavanaugh, council members, on Saguaro, a lot of those areas that are kind of like the gaps are actually for drainage to get across from one side of Saguaro to the other. I don't know the history behind some of these, but I don't know if it was the exact areas you're talking about, but we did originally plan on making some modifications to the medians on Saguaro, but then the direction came back to, it would have driven up the cost. It was to fix the road in its current configuration. So that's what we're doing.
Well, I guess for the sake of this exercise, I'd like to see if, and since it's not really stated on there, but just something to put on that long distance list of something to look at in the future, and, you know, maybe 20 years from now, but a way to deal with, especially at Panorama and Saguaro. And if it could be called a reconfiguration by losing some of the median. I think they did this down by Monterey a number of years ago as well because of some accidents. But I guess those were a couple of things that just jumped out, that it was like, if we're talking, you know, distant,
Again,
something that could be identified.
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of council, I think what we're trying to do is clean the slate and start over, just simply put, okay? Because we've got so many placeholes in there, we don't even know what they are in what they were scoped to do in those projects. And that, I mean, I guess you can go ahead and put it in there, but it will not be funded. There's no, you know, you saw the numbers. But if we go in there and put it for 20 years down the road, now that you're talking about a 20-year plan, and I don't recommend you talking about a 20-year plan on a CIP, because reality is 5 years, 10 years, that crystal ball gets real fuzzy on what we're going to need.
Yeah, I know, it's just
yeah.
in the past, our crystal ball extended
Yeah,
a list that was huge.
It's massive.
It was like, how would you ever deal with such a huge list?
exactly.
So, anyway,
I mean, there's obviously perfect opportunities in the future to talk about those, but those need to be in that reality discussion of, do we have the monies that are available, to plan for that within a 5-year period? Because we're not going to have a whole lot of money to be doing that with, and operationally, with any operational monies that we know of, and that anything that's going to be in the future is probably going to have to be considered of a bond, and a bond issue.
there are some
Ask the
individuals in the
voters.
community that actually think that that frontage road is going away as part of the Swaro project.
No.
So I'm just saying, there's some confusion there, and I see that that's one of the ones that is on the elimination list.
Yeah, we remember when we started talking about the first bond that failed and went back and did a postmortem and went to all the groups, organizations, surveys. They said, go build the road as it is. Go replace it. And we heard that loud and clear. So that's what we recommended to the then council. Go do replacement. Yeah, it would have been nice to solve some of those problems with that frontage road and a few other things that needed to be done to it as well, and enhancements. I'm still a believer that it needed to be a sidewalk down there, because we are not just in car transportation, it's multimodal, and we need to be thinking about those. And we didn't, in order to get that bond passed, we said, okay, we'll go replace it of what's there. And that's what was recommended, and that's what was approved.
Any further questions, Councilwoman Hanson?
Nope.
No?
Nope.
Councilman Magazine, do you have a question?
A couple of questions. Under projects to be canceled, what criteria were used under the stormwater management drainage projects to cancel all of those, or am I misunderstanding this?
Might want to ask the town engineer to better clarify that for us.
Mayor, Councilman Magazine, I actually went through all of those as best I could figure out what they were from years or even decades ago, and did a 7-page report to Paul and the town manager regarding what we believe those projects to have been, and what they encompassed, and what I felt their priority was. And so the ones to be canceled are ones that I recommended that would be canceled, either because we've already completed the project, or because it's no longer needed, or because it's really a low priority compared to the other projects. Does that answer your question, sir?
Sort of.
Okay.
If they'd been canceled, if they'd already been accomplished, why would they be on a list to be canceled? I thought you said some of them had already been accomplished.
Yes, yeah, the project number is shown to be canceled because the project was completed as a part of another project. For example, in the Saguaro Boulevard Bond Program, we actually are completing a couple of these projects that were previously listed as a separate project. For example, the drainage improvements at Palisades is probably in there.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you or anybody actually visually gone out and looked at this list? I find myself just a little bit troubled by, I suspect there had to be a reason why they were listed in the first place. And they may be lower priority, or some of them may be lower priority, but should they really all be canceled?
Okay.
Maybe I can better explain. We have a binder that's literally a foot thick that the flood control there was a study done back in the mid-90s regarding the drainage in Fountain Hills, which is different than a lot of places in the valley because we don't really have detention basins. What they looked at was a 100-year storm to keep water off the road. Some of those projects would be massive, expensive, and we know from historical experience, when we get a pretty decent rainstorm, what parts of the road that we need to shut down. You're going to get McDowell Mountain Road just north of town is going to be shut down. You'll get a pretty good crossing at El Pueblo and the Ashbrook Wash, those areas. So Randy went through all those projects, and a lot of them didn't have a really good scope provided back from the 90s. So we looked at historically what Randy thought and what our street department sees, where we see flooding and where we haven't seen a project or haven't seen any flooding ever. But there was a project, because if there is a 100-year flood one day, it's going to flood. I mean, it's just no way around it. So I think these numbers and project numbers were generated, like Ken said, decades ago. So we're going back trying to figure out what the actual project is. Even on the ones that are remaining, it's a little bit fuzzy what the scope is. And we know there's issues there of what the actual scope needs to be and the cost. And one of the things that we're talking about is you really need to hire a drainage engineering consultant to come back in and look at those projects and look at the scope. I mean, honestly, to fix the problem at El Pueblo and Ashbrook, you'd have to build a bridge.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to do that.
Right.
It's just cost prohibitive. So, that's a long answer. Short answer is Randy went through, looked at everything, where we had problems before. Is there an issue? Sometimes developers did projects, but the project number never got canceled.
So presumably, we would know if any of the citizens in these areas had in the last year, 2 years, whatever, complained about the problem.
Oh yeah, we know where the road's over top.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Yates.
Madam Mayor, to Councilman Magazine's point, the whole purpose, well, not the whole purpose, but part of the purpose of this exercise is to clean the slate, correct?
Yes,
To get all this out of the way that went in.
correct.
Mayor, if I may.
Councilman Lachey.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead. I
Just
have no
point.
more voice, so
That's
I'll point.
okay, just point, throw something at me, that's fine. Thank you for that. I was going to say vice mayor, I mean, that just changed, didn't it? Yeah. Well, you did a good job as a vice mayor. In addition to what you just stated, I think that a 5-year plan absolutely makes sense. And it's really not that complicated because we only have so much money. And the staff is prioritizing based on what those needs are, and we need to match the money with the project. So I would imagine in year 3 of this plan, we'll start looking, whoever's here, at the next 5-year plan, and some of these projects may reappear. So, once again, it's about becoming realistic about what our revenues are and what our potential revenues are. And right now, we have a pretty good 5-year horizon, and that could change either up or down. So I'm really comfortable with the work that's been done. Thank everyone involved in that. And with that being said, are you looking for motions?
Yes, we'll need 3 motions.
Okay, I move to approve the first of the non-viable CIP projects as recommended by staff, and to have staff bring back recommendations for prioritizing the remaining CIP projects to a future council meeting for further discussion and possible action.
A second.
Mayor, second.
Do we have any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor,
Mayor 6-0.
Mayor, if I may, I move to approve the first CIP projects, the list of CIP projects for inclusion in the FY 15-16 budget.
Mayor, second.
Okay. Speaker cards?
Give it to Al.
No, Mayor.
All right. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor 6-0.
And if I may, I move to approve the amendment to the pavement management program regarding the asphalt replacement plan as recommended by staff.
Do I get a second?
Second.
And no speaker cards on that item either? All right, then all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor 6-0.
Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
And all in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
We have